Welcome to our final video in the series on Sarah, which is part of our Faith, Failings, and Mercy, Characters of the Old Testament. Today is simply going to be some discussion questions. So as we look at Sarah as a character in the Bible, what are some of the things that we wonder about? I'm going to give you kind of 4 discussion questions. And then at the end of this video, there'll be the link. So if you want to participate in the Zoom workshop or the Zoom discussion study, we'll be getting together next week, Sunday, which is July the 7th at 6 p.m. And the link for the Zoom discussion will be at the end of this video. So you can join in on that if you'd like. So as you've watched the last 3 videos on Sarah, we've heard a little bit of her story, talked a little bit about what maybe some of it means. And here's the things that I think are worth, maybe doing a little more discussion on. Sarah primarily is defined by her role in relationship to others. Again, because she's a secondary character in the Bible, not a primary character, the storyline doesn't follow her, it follows her husband. Because she's a secondary character, we hear about her mostly in relationship to the other characters. She's defined as a wife, she's the wife of Abraham, and as a mother. She is the mother of Isaac. And so because she's defined primarily by her relationships, I think it's helpful as we think about Sarah to ask the question, what do her relationships tell us about her as a person and about her relationship with the world? So the first question is, what do we learn about Sarah from her relationship with Isaac? Remember, we have a couple of, I was going to say Abraham first, but so her relationship with Abraham. We have a couple of little vignettes about her relationship with Abraham. Primarily, the stories of her relationship with Abraham that are recorded in the scriptures are that she's his wife, that there are 2 situations where he hands her off and then to another man and then gets her back. So that's really all the big stories we have about her and Abraham as a relationship. So what do we learn about Sarah from that relationship? What do we learn about Sarah from her relationship with Hagar? This is her slave girl that she gives to her husband Abraham so that she can have a child by her. And then, of course, the relationship turns sour when Hagar seems to lord it over Sarah that she had a child biologically and that Sarah did not. I've heard arguments made that, this was a fairly normal, and there's other places in the scriptures where we can see where this is a fairly normal way for barren women of some means to have a child, that they have their maids or their slave girls become wives to their husbands. It happens in other stories. But at least in this story, there seems to be a lot of jealousy there, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. So at the same time that the story says that Ishmael becomes, Sarah's child because she's having a child through her slave girl, a child for herself through her slave girl, there also seems to be kind of a second-class status there for Ishmael, Hagar's biological son. So what do we learn about Sarah from her relationship to Hagar and Ishmael? Third, what do we learn about Sarah from her relationship to her son Isaac? We don't hear a lot about Sarah and Isaac other than that his birth brings her great joy and maybe in some sense vindication. But what do we learn about Sarah from her relationship to Isaac? And having heard all of these other stories of Sarah's relationship to various people, what do we learn about God? What do we learn about Sarah's relationship to God? What do we learn about our own relationship to God when we find ourselves in messy conflicted or otherwise difficult relationships within our family. What I note is that though Sarah and Abraham often had doubts and often went in different directions than what perhaps God would have planned or chosen, throughout the story of Sarah's life, it seems that God remains faithful to Sarah. So even though there's all sorts of other things going on, God's faithfulness doesn't change. So those are the discussion questions. We'll be talking about those further at our Zoom discussion gathering, or you can, kind of think about them on your own. And then in 2 weeks, so this next week will be our Zoom discussion gathering. The week after that, then we'll be starting our next unit, and we're going to look at Hagar. So we'll hear the story from Hagar's perspective. There's a few pieces from Hagar's perspective that we didn't hear as part of the Sarah story. So that'll be our next unit as we look at kind of the secondary characters, the persons who relate to the primary characters in the Old Testament. Have a great week, have a great night, and hopefully we'll see some of you Sunday, July 7th at 6 p.m. on the Zoom discussion.